Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. David, thank you so much for joining me on Coaching Call. How are you, my friend?
Good. Doing good, man. I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so it's very interesting the way that I found you, actually. I started learning guitar, and then I said, let me look up online and see, and I found you on YouTube, and then I started following you on TikTok, and great stuff. And I was like, oh man, this guy, he's passionate about what he does, and so passionate that you're up 7 a.m. to be on this show. So I truly appreciate you.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you so
problem.
much.
Yeah, us musicians, we're night owls. So
Yeah.
early in the morning, we're not firing on all 8 cylinders. But I'm gonna do my best.
Yeah, no, I don't think you have to even try. I think you're amazing, my friend.
Oh, thank you. I
So,
appreciate
and I just want to share with you the guitar that I started with. It's a Fender. It's a New
Ooh,
Porter. So it's kind of
nice.
cool. It's a acoustic.
Perfect.
And I am, as a martial arts instructor, also I'm not even a white belt yet. So,
Nice. It
but
takes time, but just chip away at it,
that's it. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to get to know who you are as an individual. Talk to me about where you grew up and who are your biggest influences before even the age of 10. When did you pick up your first instrument?
Yeah, I grew up actually. I live in San Diego, Southern California. I love
Mhm.
California. I've been living here 22 years. But
Nice.
originally, I grew up on the East Coast in New Jersey, and uh, I kind of over the years, I graduated college from New Jersey, and then over the years, I kind of needed a change, and I kind of grew a little tired of the climate. If anyone spent any time in the East Coast, the
Mhm.
winters are brutally cold and snowy, and the summers are very humid and hot. I kind of got tired. I wanted to live somewhere where the weather was more like springtime all year round. So I moved to San Diego. But anyway, uh, yeah, so I grew up on the East Coast, and as far as before the age of 10, um, my parents were pretty strong influences in my life, and my grandparents. We had a very small family. My father was an only child. My mother only had one sibling, so it was a really tiny family. So I kind of got. We spent a lot of time growing up with my grandparents on my dad's side, so we kind of at an early age, got the importance of family and structure, and so that was pretty good. And as far as guitar, I picked up my first guitar, I guess, was in the 6th grade. In my
Mm.
elementary school, like back then, most elementary schools, they only mainly had like band instruments, like you could learn trumpet or clarinet,
Right.
like that. But in like when I was in 6th grade, my last year in elementary school, they got like a couple of acoustic guitars, and they said, okay, if you're, we're gonna let the person with the, best behavior, if you're a good kid, you get to take the guitar home. And the music teacher gave you like a little lesson, nothing formal or anything. But anyway, by the time it worked out to me, I finally got my hands on it, and um, I was able to play it and take a few lessons with the music. And that was how I was first kind of introduced to it. Other than the fact that growing up, my parents were always listening to music. My dad had a record collection, and he would listen to um, bands like Santana, and I really early on, I kind of really was drawn to the guitar sounds. I didn't know a lot about music or what, but I just knew that I liked it. So there was music playing a lot, and growing up. So yeah, looking back, and then when I had an older sister. She was 4 years older, and
Mm,
a big turning point was she was probably a teenager, maybe 15. So I probably was 10 or 11, and she brought home a bunch of records, and that kind of first introduced me to rock because she brought home stuff like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and the first Boston
mm.
record, and and I love those records, and she used to get pissed at me because I used to go in and play those records and listen to them, and she didn't want me touching them. She didn't want them all scratched up, right? But that kind of like really kind of set me up for what was to come because I was just kind of drawn to it. And then I started listening to the radio and listening to, classic rock back then, growing up in the 70s, and then 80s, was a big part of growing up listening to the hair metal bands and all the guitar virtuosos
Mhm, mhm,
and whatnot. So, I mean, I guess probably not unlike many people, I was just drawn to it. And, we just all seem to have that as human beings, like I find it interesting that music is, I never met a person in my life that didn't like some type of music.
mhm,
Everybody likes some type of music. And I don't know what else you could really say that about. Like, not everybody likes, you know, going to bed early. Not everybody likes spinach. Not everybody likes, the New York Rangers, whatever. But everybody likes some type of music. So it's something very innate within us, I think, something tribal that draws us to it. And but that's kind of like an interesting thing I've always found pretty interesting. Yeah. So yeah, listening to those records early kind of had a big, again, not that I really knew much about music or, how they were making it, but I knew I liked it and I knew I was drawn to it. Yeah.
mm,
Early on.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Santana, man, what an incredible, incredible musician,
Yeah.
huh?
My dad was a huge fan of his. So
Mm,
that that one record, I remember it. In fact, now that he's listening to, I think it was the first Santana record. It was the one with the gray and the white cover and the lady on it, but it also looked like a lion. I don't have a,
mm,
it's a very famous cover, and I used to stare at that cover, and growing up, and then years later, like I like listening to music on vinyl. I really like vinyl. I like collecting vinyl and listening to music. To me, there's just nothing like dropping the needle on a record, and that's the way the music was designed in the studio by the artist, to hear it on vinyl, to hear it through
oof,
speakers, not listen through earbuds or listening on your computer
right.
speakers, to get the full experience. Anyway,
Mm.
so like I went out years ago and I got a original copy of that record, because
Wow.
I used to listen to it. So I have that first Santana. I think it's his first record. I'm not, maybe not his first record, but it's an early one. But anyway,
Mhm.
so yeah, but he was a big, and then later on he would go see Santana in concert. He was a big, Santana was one of his favorites. Yeah, so
Nice, nice.
yeah,
So you picked up the guitar. Was it like an immediate passion? Did you fall in love with it right away, or did it just take some
yeah.
finagling?
No, with me it was pretty immediate. Like I knew I I knew I wanted to learn an instrument, but I wasn't really drawn to any of the instruments that kids were playing in school, like
Mm,
being in the marching band or the band instruments. Although there's nothing wrong with that,
right,
and that's very cool. But I was more into the rock end of things, and you didn't see anybody playing a tuba in a rock band.
right.
So I always liked the drums. I always liked guitar. And then like I had a friend who played drums, and he would like show me some things, and I'd be like, "That's cool," but it just really didn't click with me.
Mm,
And then I finally, um, I have a younger brother too, and he brought a guitar home one day that was a friend of his, and we were very young, but I kind of hijacked that guitar. What's the word? I commandeered that
commandeered it.
yeah, I commandeered it, and then I put it in my hands, and then once it was in my hands, that was it. I was
Mm,
hooked. And then I got my own guitar, like everybody's first guitar when you're young because you can't afford anything nice. You get a, just a piece of junk with the strings, or, you could drive a truck underneath the strings because the action's so high. But, you kind of, that's what you learn on, and to get your hands in the muscle memory. And then once I started going, that was it. Like, it just took over. Probably too much, because like I was kind of a loner growing up. I didn't have like tons of friends. I didn't do a lot of things. I didn't relate to a lot of people. So the guitar was great because that was kind of my thing. But at the same time, I would literally be in my room 6-7 hours a day playing. I used to drive my mom crazy. She'd be like, "I hear that guitar. I'm trying to sleep." But I probably missed out on a lot of other things because I was doing that just so much. But that's how I became, pretty good at it fairly quickly, because I put so much time into it. Not that everybody has to learn that way. That's just at my time in my life. That's what I did. So yeah, it was a lot of work. I wouldn't say that it came to me quick. I mean, I was very dedicated and very intense about it. So I just powered through the really challenging aspects of it. And, I just kept chipping away, and back then, like you were growing up, I'm sure there was no internet like now. Like, you could pull up all kinds of martial arts stuff, or you could pull up all kinds of guitar stuff, or you could pull up how to learn anything, how to toilet, how to whatever. It's there for us. But back then, we didn't have that. So, it was a school of hard knocks. So, I used to learn with magazines and books, and until I was able to, get some crappy minimum wage job and save up enough money to take some lessons, and that's how, and eventually get good enough to start trying out for bands. But, there wasn't the internet wasn't around back then. So it was kind of a different learning curve for everyone. And I think that was good and it was bad. There was good and bad points about having
Oh,
it or not
sure.
having it. Yeah.
One of the things that you basically spoke about is sacrifice, right? When you say because you were honing your craft, if you will, you kind of sacrificed on other things. You missed out, and I think that's what happens when you want to become an expert at something. When you have to put the time, you have to put the effort. People who half do it, they'll never become, right? Or they'll be okay. But
Yeah.
to become someone worthy of that skill, you have to put the time in, like you did. 6,
Yeah.
7 hours in your room, and your mom saying, "Stop it." I
Yeah.
think that's kind of funny, but it just goes to show that the passion was there. You were not getting paid as a young boy to play guitar, and so when did you realize that this passion of yours was something that you can start to share with other people?
Yeah. Well, once once I was and again, there's so many different ways that you can go about learning the instrument. And
Right.
you know like I said, I kind of took it to the extreme. And not everyone has to do that, because not everybody wants to be a professional musician. A lot of people just want to play as a hobby and, enjoy it with their friends, and that's cool. And that's one of the great things about learning an instrument, and probably a lot of other um things that you interview teachers and trainers about. Like, one of the great things about learning an instrument that I find is, once you learn, it's a skill that will bring you joy the rest of your life. The rest of your life you'll be playing and you'll be enjoying it. Even if you put it down for a little while, you pick it back up and whatnot.
Mhm.
um, for me, as far as sharing it, like, once I got to the point where I could start trying out for bands, like I wanted to get into a band, and then I wanted to, start playing out. And like everyone else, you start out playing in cover bands, and you start out, kind of honing your craft and refining your skills. And then the creative side takes over, and then I wanted to start writing original music, and looking for other musicians of like mind to create with. And then I started to find that. And I wasn't teaching at that point, because I was putting more time into, learning the craft and refining my art, and then creating original music. And then I kind of made a decision like, okay, if I want to do this, eventually full time, I'm going to need to start thinking about, income stream. I'm going to need to start thinking about, how can I make enough money to to support my financial goals and obligations. And it's
Hmm.
very, very, very difficult in the music field to do that. And I quickly found out, because once I started trying out for bands, you know, you start trying out and you probably don't get the first few auditions, and you keep going, and then eventually you start making the callbacks, and then you still don't get to get, and then eventually you get in if you just keep at it and keep working at it. And then quickly I found out that, there's not a lot of money here. There's not a lot of money playing these small shows, and, not a lot of money just playing in your local town. And that's fine, because I wasn't doing it
Hmm.
for that. It was a passion thing. But you quickly find out, hey, you know, um, I'm going to need to start thinking about, if I'm going to do this, how can I start making money? And then eventually led me to the path of teaching,
Mm.
like, and it's interesting because with teaching, I quickly found out that early on, I found out that teaching requires a whole other set of skills than
Oh
just
yeah.
or being a great guitar player. Because there's lots of great guitar players out there, but just because you're a great player doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a great teacher. And I,
Hmm.
and I found that out pretty fast, because, like most people, when I started taking private lessons, I had to go through 3, 4, 5 teachers till I found one that I connected with, till I found one that really took what they did seriously. And that was kind of like eye-opening to me. Like, not to say the teachers I were going to were really that bad. They just, were trying to make extra money, and but they weren't fantastic teachers. It took me a while to find my, like, guru guy. So I quickly found out that, okay, I'm going to need, you need a whole nother set of skills. And you start working on that, and then eventually, it took me to the point where I could start teaching and sharing, and start making money that way. And then that took me down a whole nother road. So,
Mm.
and then you have these other roads as a musician too. Like, basically, when you're a musician, you have to have a lot of balls in the air. You have to have a
True.
lot of income coming in from various streams, unless you're like at the top of the game in your band, and you're playing, like, headlining, like, mid-size arenas and mid-size venues where you're headlining. Then you're touring around the country, and you're selling a lot of merch. Then you could make enough just with that. But
Hmm.
unless you're at a pretty high level, it's really hard, unless you have multiple streams coming in, to as a and plus, on top of that, the music business is a brutal, brutal business.
I can
It-
only, well, so many people in it, if you will, right?
yeah, it's interesting, and it's gotten even more as time has gone on. It's again good and bad, like, because now, like, as an original artist creating music, it's really hard to get your music heard. Really, really
Mm.
hard, because the the marketplace is flooded, is inundated with music, because now you really don't even have to be a musician to create music. There's so many virtual instruments and whatnot that people are creating stuff. And again, I think that's good and bad,
Right.
but it makes it really hard to get your stuff heard, because it's just so flooded. But that's the way the scene is now, and we have to navigate and traverse those paths and find our ways around it. So yeah, so that's kind of what led me into starting to share my passion and my art with other people. Yeah.
Mm. David, thank you for that. It's super interesting, to hear from your perspective of even how you got started, and you wanted to be in a band. Why? Why did you want to be in a band?
I guess because, at the time I started to I was playing, and I started, I guess, I was young when the first Van Halen record came out, Eddie Van Halen.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
although I was young, and I was playing, but I wasn't really any good back then. I was just kind of getting going. But when that record came out, that was a big deal. And I knew it was important. Again, I was just getting going. So, but that was like the equivalent of an atomic bomb being dropped on the guitar and the music community, because he was
Mhm.
such a revolutionary player in so many ways, and what he kind of changed the instrument.
Mm.
But I saw him playing on television, and I saw like how much fun he was having, and I saw him like, I don't know what the show was, but I saw clips of him backstage with the band, and the antics and all the fun they were having, and I was like, that's what I want to do. Eventually. It took me a
Mm.
while to get there. Like, if I can do something like that, that's what I want to do, because he was doing something he loved and was passionate about it, and he was so good at it, and it was bringing joy to so many people, and it was just something I'm like, wow, that's what I really would love to do. And then you
Mm.
kind of see, I mean, to be 100% honest, like, you know, you see musicians, and as like most kind of, nerdy loner kids, you see all the girls that quote unquote they get, right? Like
Yes.
that's like the lifestyle. And
Mhm.
and I don't, if anybody says, well, that wasn't really a factor, I don't know if that's true, because of course, it's like, wow, maybe with this too, it's something I can, I can get some girls, so, that plays a part of it too, because, when you're sitting there alone in your bedroom practicing 8 hours a day, it's like, oh man. But yeah, so seeing Eddie Van Halen, he was a big influence on me,
Mhm.
both uh, through his just seeing him and doing it, and also through his playing. And he
Mm.
influenced, a plethora of guitar players. So many people always list him. Like he's one of the big influence. Probably most people, you ask them, who's one of your big influences? A lot of times, especially people who are in my generation, will say Eddie Van Halen.
Mhm.
He was kind of like, to me, in my opinion, like a guy like that comes around like once a generation. You
Right.
know, like just a two, and like he's kind of like the equivalent of Jimi Hendrix. To me, Jimi Hendrix kind of changed the game, just total
It sure
revolutionary,
did. Yeah.
something just totally different. Like he was a guy, and he was a big influence on me too. So he was a guy who did it, and then like a guy like Eddie Van Halen, in that kind of same thing. Eddie Van Halen might even took it even further, but those guys are just total revolutionaries, and totally inspiring, and in so many ways. Yeah. So yeah,
Mm.
so that's kind of the long answer to your question. That kind of
Mhm.
got me going down that path.
Well,
But and a big thing too is the struggle with trying to go down that path, but at the same time, you know, as you get older, you got to have a full-time job and make enough money. So it's like
Mhm.
I'm working at some job that I really don't want to do, but I need to do it because I got to eat and pay the rent. And I'm trying to get to the point where I can branch off and do music full time. So it's
Mm.
it's a tough road to traverse. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So Bill Merck puts in David's story is a great lesson on what it takes to be exemplary in any path we choose. So, yes, thank you, Bill, for joining us. And absolutely, your story is phenomenal. And that's why I'm so happy that you took the time, because when I reached out to you, like, who is this guy? And you finally, we had a conversation. You said you'd be happy to be on the show, and I'm happy you accepted as well. Let me ask you, what was it like your first time that you got accepted into a band, and what was the emotions that went through that for you?
Yeah, that was a big deal. It was trying to remember. I was pretty young, but there was a bunch of people that I was friends with a few people, and they played instruments, and they played in like a band, and then like one or two of those guys kind of broke off, but I was always like below them level wise, and
Mm.
then that's when I realized how hard I had to work in order to get in a band. And then when I finally did, it was an amazing feeling to be able to make music with people. It's nothing really quite like it. It's really something, especially the first one. And then you realize, then there's a whole nother set of challenges that come with it. For instance, most of the time you get in a band and you want to start playing live and playing shows, and that's what like most most guys do first. Like I said, you play cover songs, and then you work into doing your originals and getting good enough
Mhm.
to write your own songs. So a whole nother thing came up is that, okay, now I'm playing in front of people, and I was like, this is fucking scary. It was like I had a lot of stage fright at first, and
Mm.
I was really nervous. And I think most people are, looking out into the crowd and everybody's staring at you, and you have to perform, and it was very uncomfortable. And I remember those first few shows. I mean, I was really, really nervous, and I think that's something that everybody had to work through.
Mm.
But I had bad stage fright at first, and so you had to deal with that. And then eventually, it gets less and less and less. And the more you do it, the easier and easier and easier it gets. Easier in quotes, because it's never easy, because it's a tremendous amount of work, and you always have to
Mhm.
keep your keep up on. But as far as the stage fright part of it, I found that eventually I was able to get comfortable on stage, and to the point where it's like I'm not really nervous about playing in front of people. I'm more excited about it, and more excited about playing live and looking forward to it. But that took a while. So working through
Mm.
the nerves was, for me, I think everybody has a different degree of it. We all probably experience it the first time, because it's just so different and uncomfortable, something you're not used to doing. But eventually, I was able to conquer it. Yeah. So those were good times. The thing about a band, and then eventually, that band doesn't work out. Bands are an interesting animal, and pretty much, unless you're like in a band like, you know, Kiss or Aerosmith or Rush, that's been together 30, 40 years, which is a total, the atypical. If you're in a band, it's gonna break up. It's inevitable.
Mm.
It's
Right.
inevitable, that it's a very short shelf life.
Well,
So you
different
go.
personalities, right?
Right, exactly. A lot of musicians, a lot of, everybody's very headstrong. Sometimes there's egos. You're spending a tremendous amount of time with each other, and eventually you get on each other's nerves. Eventually, one person wants to go this direction, you want to go this direction. So it's a constant. It's hard to find, and it's hard to be on the exact same page as three, four other people. So
Mhm.
bands are an interesting dynamic, but I eventually worked up to the point where I found some musicians early on, that were very much on the same page as me, and that I was very much, um, I really enjoyed being with and hanging out with. That's the big first lesson I learned about bands. And that's like, everyone tells me, what's your biggest advice to get in a band? My biggest piece of advice to anyone to do that, pro tip, is if you're going to get in a band, get with people that you like to hang out with. Get in
Mhm.
a band with people that you want to be with, because you're going to be spending so much time. Get in a band with people that you want to be friends with, and that are of the same ilk. If not,
Mm.
there's going to be issues. So that band, I was able to, and we were writing original music as well as we were playing a lot of shows. And that became like a second family to me. I think a lot of people have that experience, especially early on, but this is before, any of us are married or have kids.
Right,
It's
right.
like, that's what we do. You spend holidays together. We went on vacations together, and we wrote music all the time. And that was a special time in my life with that band, because we were like family, and we were
Mm.
together for, 3, 4 years, until it happens where, well, a bunch of things happen, because we had a kind of got this record deal thing going. But then, you get to the point where everyone wants to go in a different direction,
Mm.
personalities start to clash, and it breaks up. But yeah, if you could finding that chemistry is special, very special. And a lot of times it takes a while to find the right group of guys or girls, or combination of whatever. But the big thing I learned is, because I learned those lessons, and the lessons are hard lessons to learn. So I try to share them. Like I remember clearly I got in this one band one time, and I was playing shows on the East Coast in New York, and with this band, and it was technically really challenging stuff, and it was great. And we auditioned. We found this one drummer, and he was a phenomenal drummer. This guy,
Mm.
because the stuff we were doing was tough, progressive rock, and this guy was fantastic, but he was a total prick. He was just not a nice guy. He was
Mm.
just miserable. But because he was so talented, we took him in and we started playing with him, and it totally blew up. It just didn't work,
Mm.
And I didn't know, I was still very young back then. Like, I sacrificed at that time, saying, okay, we're going to overlook the fact that he's not kind of like us, and he's kind of a jerk, but he's so good, you know?
Mm.
and it totally doesn't work. Totally didn't work
No.
because it was just not fun. It was he just made it not fun to
Yeah,
be
you
around.
could the chemistry, I guess, is super important, right?
Super important, yeah, especially if you're writing original music, you gotta have that,
Mm,
But yeah, unless you're at like this incredibly high level where you have to stay together, then then I could see people staying together, and that happens a lot. Like there was
mhm,
times when John Bon Jovi and Richie Zambora hated each other. They wouldn't even talk to each other, but
mm,
they had to stay together as a band because when you're together, when you reach that level of musician and that level of popularity, if you leave, unless you're the lead guy, you have to
right.
start back at the bottom again. Because you
Mhm,
built this brand for 20 years. That's why a lot
mm,
of these bands stay together if they can after so long. Because where are they going to go? They're not going to start all over again
right.
that much. So yeah, but for most bands, you got to get with people that you really want to hang out with and be together a lot with. So yeah. So you like you going through whatever martial arts, whatever there's these valuable lessons you learn over time that you try to impart on your students, and make their journey a little easier.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, what was the first song you ever learned to play?
Oh man, the first song, it was probably either a Jimi Hendrix song or a Rush song. It might have
Mm,
been Purple Haze. I really like Jimmy. Again, I was really young, and he was like before my time. I think he died
right.
in 1970. Um, but it was probably them or my big band in high school. I was a big Rush fan. I really was drawn to the progressive rock when I started to, because as you start listening to things, it starts to, and you get more and more into music, it takes you down paths. You're like, okay, this I really like, this not so much, and you carve out what you really like. And I was really drawn to the long epic songs and the journey and the concept records. So Rush was the band that really was a big influence on me. So it might have been one of their songs, or probably it was a Jimi Hendrix song because the Rush stuff is complex. So when I was first learning, I think I was trying to put together some Hendrix songs
Mm,
first. Yeah,
mhm.
because he was a big influence on me as well.
Gotcha.
So yeah. So again, it was just more, learning through books and learning by ear. Like earlier, I was like, well, there was probably good and bad to not or having or not having the internet. One of the things was when you were learning songs back then, there was no now whatever everyone just looks them up online and looks at the tabs. We
Right.
didn't have that. So like I had to sit there, I would sit there for hours with a tape recorder and just get the songs I want to learn on cassette and just rewind, listen, rewind, pour out. Literally I had to get other tape recorders and most people did back then. That's
Mhm.
how you learn. And
Right.
and but what that did was it developed my ear because I had to figure it out by ear. I didn't have someone.
Mm,
There wasn't a way, unless occasionally I would get the magazines, the guitar magazine. It would have a transcription in it, but
mm,
that was only a few songs. So that helped develop. So now as a musician, and I have a really good ear. I don't have perfect pitch, but I have good relative pitch.
mm,
And I keep telling students, that's one thing that I tell a lot of my students is to get to be a better musician, you really have to develop your ear. It's really, really important.
mm.
But, people don't sit there and take the time to figure out most people's songs when you could just pull them up and it's so easy, especially
Yeah.
early on. Because early
Mhm.
on, you can't tell a D from a G from a C by
Right,
listening
right.
to it. You just don't have that ear development yet. So part of my training is I get students, I help to try to develop their ear early and that's important because having a good ear is really important and it really helps you in so many ways as a musician. So that kind of, although that was a tremendous amount of work, like I said, I just remember sitting there just
Mm,
hours of working that tape deck trying to figure out these songs, um, but that's what we did. That's how you learn back then.
yeah, yeah. It's very interesting because it's only now, this past July, that I said, "Okay, it's time. It's time." And I had two friends of mine, and they went to the guitar store with me. And one of the questions is, "What kind of guitar you want to play?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." And then they're like, "Do you want metal or nylon strings?" I'm like, uh, so they go, like, "We're gonna get you into metal strings." I said, "Okay." And then, "Do you want electric or acoustic. I'm like, I know I want to, for some reason, I know I want acoustic.
Right
You know, I
on.
want to be able to, you know, play without anything else, just the guitar by
Right.
itself. And then they took me in this room and they started playing. I was like, wow, I want to be able to do what you guys do.
Yeah.
Because they both have been in bands. They're both incredible guitarists. Each one of them owns over 30 guitars. So it's pretty interesting. Um, and even though they were there helping me pick out a guitar, they were almost shopping for another one for
Right.
themselves
Yeah.
because that passion, it's so evident in someone who has um, done it for so long, like yourself. I'm sure you have tons of guitars as well. Um, I know you have a guitar on your lap there. What and have you played differently, or do you use nylon or metal? What as far as strings, what is your preference?
Yeah. Yeah, I play, and I teach whatever. This is electric. I teach electric. I teach acoustic. I play acoustic. I'm in a bunch of different bands. I play shows with, electric. I do acoustic shows. So, I play a lot of different instruments. And it's interesting that, guitar is such an infectious instrument. That's,
Mm,
most people that, once you get going and once you see that you could start to play songs, it just kind of takes over. And most guitar players, like your friends, they're gearheads, and it's all about the sounds and creating,
mhm,
and that's why we have this passion for different guitars and different gear and different amps and whatnot. So I like a lot of different stuff. I'm not really married to any one brand. I kind of look at the guitar personally, and this is just my take. I look at it as a tool.
mm,
Look at it as a tool to create my art. So I don't really get like emotionally attached to instruments. And if you do, that's cool. Like I know a lot of guys who are like, I'm gonna search out and find that first guitar I had when I first learned. I had this. I'm gonna go on a search for the internet, and that's cool. But with me, it's like I look at kind of like a guitar. I think they're beautiful, and I think they're
mhm,
works of art.
right,
But it's like if I have a guitar that's sitting around and I'm not playing it much, I don't have tons and tons of guitars. There was a time in my life when I did, but if I don't
mm,
have, I play a lot of shows, so a lot of my guitars are working instruments.
mm,
I think guitars, in my opinion, should be played and enjoyed and used to create music. I'm not a big proponent of collecting them and then just sitting under the bed somewhere collecting dust, or like some guys use them as like a hedge fund. To me, that's not what they're about. If you do that, that's cool. I'm not judging. But for me, it's like if I have a guitar and it's sitting there and I'm not playing it for a long, it bothers me. So I
mm,
sell it or I trade it and I get something else.
right,
So and I create art, like I love Fender Stratocasters, like you have a Fender. I love those. I have a couple Strats. I love Les Pauls. I love Paul Reed Smith guitars. I love there's so many brands that I like. I
right,
like Sir guitars. I have acoustics. I like Taylors. I have a Paul Reed Smith acoustic. So I like all these different guitars. I mean, they're all sound different. They're all cut from a different piece of the tree. Me, I've been playing so long that it's like, and I feel like, a lot of your sound, your tone is in your hands and in your heart,
mm,
and
right,
how you attack the strings and how you bend them. And, so like I could, Eddie Van Halen, I'll put it to you this way. Eddie Van Halen could have picked up any guitar through any amp and play, and he's going to sound like Eddie Van Halen.
mm,
The guitar, again, just a tool, doesn't matter as much. Now, you want to certainly have the best gear you can afford. And some guitars certainly sound better than others. A lot of it is subjective, or they play better. But for me, at my point now, playing one guitar over the next, yeah, one guitar will sound more like a Strat, one will sound more like a Les Paul, but there's not a tremendous because my playing is pretty established, my sound. So
mhm,
I try to spend more time, and that's what I try to tell my students too. One bad thing about the internet, I mean, it's great, but there's so much stuff out there on instruments and gear and sounds and effects. I mean, people just you could watch hours, endless. You could watch endless videos on anything and on guitar and on gear. And then it kind of, some students have the ilk like, oh, I'm gonna get the sound I want if I could just have one more thing or that next shiny thing. I need that. And my big thing is, spend more time playing, spend more time
mm,
developing your style, spend more time writing, spend more time doing that. Certainly, watch videos and look at gear and everything, but try to limit it, because otherwise you'll just get lost. It'll just take over because there's so much gear out, and there's so many manufacturers making great stuff, and there's so much stuff out there. The choices, it's incredible. It's good, but it's bad. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like I always say, more picks and less clicks. That's kind of
Ah, I
more.
like
I didn't
that.
come up with that. It's like, get your sound, you got it. Okay, go with that and spend more time, honing your craft and whatnot. Because you could get it's just so easy to get lost in that. And
Mhm.
the gear has gotten the technology is so good now. And it's so easy to get just lost in chasing after that tone. And as guitar players, we all kind of do that. We're always, trying new gear and new things, and that's great. But again, you kind of want to, limit it so it doesn't take over.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I have
So,
my preferences. There are certain guitars that I prefer, but it's where I'm at. It's not like that's not like the be all end all. I mean, I have
mhm,
some nice guitars, but I personally I don't have tons and tons of. Like I said, there was a time in my life when I was having more guitars and collecting more, but I found out that wasn't for me.
mm,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, what is the hardest song that you actually play?
The
The
hardest song.
hardest one because it's so, it's challenging, if you
Yeah.
will.
Um. Well, as far as original music, because like I write a lot of songs because I've been influenced by progressive hard rock
Mhm,
bands like Rush and Dream Theater, and very very long songs with different movements where they're and a lot of times you don't play the same thing in each verse. You're always changing it up, and a lot of odd time signatures.
mm,
Uh, and I find that music to me very interesting. So a lot of music I write like a lot of complex stuff with different time signatures and different movements. And so some of my songs that I create are kind of hard to play because it's a lot to remember, and you have to
mm.
play them often. Like if I don't play them, like if somebody in the band gets sick and we don't practice for a couple of weeks and then we start over again, it's like, oh man, I got to remember those parts all again. So only because they're tricky. Because a lot of songs, a lot of more pop songs, you probably know
Mhm.
from learning, it's the same 3 or 4 chords
Right,
over and
right,
over
right, right.
again. And that's cool and that's great. But that music is fun. So
I get
original
bored with that.
yeah, original wise, I like the stuff that's a little bit more challenging.
Mhm,
Cover band wise, like learning cover songs, probably some of the more complex songs were like that I learned were like more like probably like songs by Rush. Some of their songs that are really long or some of their instrumentals. It's just a lot of stuff to remember, you
mm,
know. Um, so that's like a lot of sit down but I'm not really into I don't really like a lot of the cover bands I play with now, it's more popular stuff that's fairly simple. So it doesn't take me very long to learn it. Or I could read it at the
right,
show.
mm,
So it's not as much the band Tool, I was playing a bunch of Tool songs with this one band for a while, and their songs are pretty complex and tricky, and there's a lot going on. So some of their songs are a little bit tricky to learn. So, some bands do some songs that are really complex and tricky, and other times it's a lot more easy. Yeah.
mhm.
So,
Nice,
it's
nice.
a matter of what you're doing and what you're playing. But, you know, some of the guys in my band, they if I bring a song to them and they're like, "Wow, the song has a lot of parts," I'm like, "I know, isn't it great?" And they're like, "It's great, but it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
to get all that down." But the guys in my original band, they're all like me. They have similar influences, and that's kind of like, it's baked into the cake that this stuff is going to be tricky, and we like that because it's challenging and it pushes us as
Mhm.
musicians. That's important. You have to kind of keep pushing yourself to the next level, and to put hard. You got to play harder things and harder songs and harder chord changes and more complex songs, and that's how you keep getting better and better and better, in my opinion.
No, I totally. What one of the things that drew me to you is definitely on TikTok, and you're very, very predominant on TikTok. And one of the things is you said, "Hey, here's a chord changes. Let me share the sheet with you," and that's how I reached out to you. And thank you for that because that I think not only helped me, but I'm sure it's helping tons of people. Um, if you have a second, actually even a minute, I'd love to hear one of your originals if you don't mind.
Yeah, I just I don't have
if you're able to.
to play it or just put it on. I could put it
Don't
on.
play it. Play it.
Can't really play it because I have it. Most of my that's the other thing too. A lot of my originals are in. I use a lot of different tunings,
Ah,
and
gotcha,
it might get
gotcha.
it. So I don't have this guitar. I don't have my other guitars here. See, a lot of my because I play a lot of live shows, so a lot of my gear is packed up.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Because so I don't really have a. Let me see if I could.
I don't mean to put you on the spot.
See, but it's a lot. In my one of my acoustics. It's a
Nice.
Taylor. I
Very
love
cool.
Taylor guitars. Taylor acoustics are awesome. There's a
Yeah.
company, by the way, that's in El Cajon, in Southern California.
Mm.
So it's really nice. I went to their factory, and they actually do a cool thing. Not to get off track, but they give factory tours for free,
Oh, that's
which is
cool.
really cool. Yeah, so you can kind of go through, and it's very interesting because you see um, all the different stages of building a guitar, from choosing the wood from
Mm.
nothing to making the top, making the necks, carving, and you see what the process is, putting in the bracing, and it's really and the doing the inlay work, the frets, the finish work, the electron. It's a very complex
Mm-hmm.
series of steps before you get to this.
Right.
And it's interesting that they do that, but it's nice that they're right in El Cajon. And I always try to, you give the local businesses some business. You know what I mean? I'm a
Of
big proponent
course.
of try to always visit the mom and pop stores, although unfortunately there's not many of them left,
Mm.
which is kind of a bummer. That's the other thing with students. I always tell students, go to your local, if you have a local music store, or local record store, try to keep these places in business, and try to limit the Amazon shopping because it's
Mm-hmm.
now
Agreed.
we're all busy,
Agreed.
so it's so easy just to click and choose a button, hit a button, and it arrives at your doorstep. But going out there, that's the other thing with guitars too. Like, you were lucky that you had some friends to go with you, because at that time, I assume, like you said, you really didn't know what you wanted, right?
Correct.
And you
Correct.
probably didn't know a lot of the differences. And it's funny because they're all different. All the guitars are different, and they all play a little differently. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you know when you're young, or when you're just starting? How do you know what works for you? And the way you find out is you got to put your hands on a lot of guitars. You got to play a lot of guitars and find out, oh, I
Yeah.
like this neck. I don't like this neck. I like this feel. I don't like this feel. I like the
Right.
satin. No, I don't. I like it finished. And when you're first playing, you don't have that. You don't know. So that's what I always tell everyone, is bring some people with you who know something about guitars. Because
Mm.
sometimes at the guitar stores, they have people that are knowledgeable,
Right.
and sometimes not so much. So it's nice having someone there with you um, that can kind of guide you through the process, especially early on. Because if you get the wrong sized guitar, it's
Mm.
really off-putting, and that could kill your guitar journey. You know, the uh, the amount of students who stop playing instruments early on is high, very, very high. I don't know what it's like in martial arts, but in instruments, like
Same
within the
thing.
same thing,
Yeah.
within the first year, a very high percentage of students quit the instrument. Guitar is a very hard instrument at first. The learning curve is really, really steep, because you got to get over the physics of the instrument. You got
Mm-hmm.
to be able to bend your fingers into these chord shapes, and you got to be able to hit the strings and make it sound and not dead strings. And then you have to learn all these different shapes. And just when you learn them, then you got to learn how to change to this chord. And
Yes.
it's like, and then you got to learn, like you learn bar chords, and it's like, how am I going to get my hand to do that? This is a very
Mm.
unnatural thing. And then
Right.
your fingers hurt. You got to build up calluses, and then you got to strum with rhythm. And at the same time you're strumming, you got to change. It's a very difficult process. So if you don't have the right guitar that fits you, that like fits your body, and that fits in your hand, you make it so incredibly hard and frustrating. Or if you don't have the right teacher,
Mm.
then you're in trouble. If you don't have, especially in the beginning, if you don't have that structured plan and you don't know what to practice, you're doomed. And then you're going to
Yeah.
put the instrument down, and it could be no fault of yours. It could be that you just didn't have the plan. You didn't have a teacher. You didn't have the structure um, that would get you at least to where you could start seeing some results. And then
Uh,
if you don't see results, you're putting it down. Excuse me. I don't think they're I don't think there's a lot of bad students, you know,
Mm.
because it's, teacher say, student do, so I
Mm.
think it's more, maybe there's a lot of mediocrity in the teaching field. There's a lot of, because if you're first learning guitar and you're dedicated and you have time to practice and you're practicing, you're going to stick with it.
Mhm.
The people that don't is maybe because they don't have time, they're not practicing, or they don't know what to practice, or they don't have that teacher. So, or have that
Right,
structured
right.
plan, like you get on my website, Next Level Guitar, where I take you through step by step. This is, so that's super important early on. But that's why the recidivism rate, I don't know if that's the right word, but the amount of students that, and it's a shame too, because I think a lot of those students who put it down, they could have maybe stuck with it and it could have brought them joy had they had the right teaching plan or the right curriculum in front of them. That's so
Mm.
important because that learning curve is so steep. And as you go on in guitar, this happens. It gets
Right.
easier and easier, but you got to get up here, and getting up to that point is extremely difficult. So guitar is one of the harder instruments to learn. But once you get past that, it gets easier. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on a
No,
tangent.
no, no. I'm loving this conversation. Let me ask you, what's easier, electric or acoustic?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a lot of students ask me that, what should be my first guitar? The bottom line is this. At first, when you're first learning, electric is easier. And
Mm.
that's only because the strings are not as thick. The action is a little lower, and it's easier to get your arm around. So
Mm.
electric is easier to play. So it is easier to learn on electric. But the thing is, like you, a lot of people are really drawn to the acoustic. They want to be able to play. They don't want to have, like, I mean, you don't necessarily have to electrify. You don't have to get an amp, and you can just use an electric like an
Right.
acoustic, but you can't, it's not going to sound like that as loud. So a lot of people are really drawn to acoustic. So if people love acoustic and have a passion for it early, then start with acoustic like you did.
Mm.
But electric is easier. But a good thing is transitioning from acoustic to electric is pretty easy because I don't know if have you picked up an electric guitar?
Not yet.
When you do, like the next time you see one, not that you have to go out and buy one, just play it and you'll be like, holy shit, this is so much easier. I mean, it's a big difference because the strings, the action, all of that. The acoustic is a little harder.
Mm.
So if you want like the easiest route, start with electric. But if you like acoustic, start with acoustic, like you did. But when you transition to electric, it's a big difference. In fact, a lot of my students who have both, I tell them, if you're practicing a certain thing, like a legato exercise or some kind of exercise, finger strength, whatever, do it on acoustic.
Mm.
Even if you play electric more, because when you go to electric, you'll be like, wow, this is easier. I'm faster. I could do this. So it's kind of like another tip. Like if you have both, practice sometimes on the acoustic, and then when you go to electric, be like, wow, this is, especially with the more challenging stuff. Yeah. So
Right, right.
yeah, and then a lot of students, I say, well, what do you have? And they're like, well, I just have acoustic. Well, then if that's what you have, then go with that. Don't go out and
Mhm.
buy anything. The only thing I do say is just make sure, like, if you have, like, sometimes students will have like an old acoustic sitting around that was their uncle's. Just make sure that it's playable, that the action isn't too high, that
Mm.
it stays in tune, because you have to limit the amount of frustration when you're first learning. So you want to make sure the guitar it plays decent, the action's not too high, and it stays in tune. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting it. You'll have enough of a hard time when you're first learning just making chord shapes and changing chords. You don't want to be fighting the guitar.
Right.
So that's why you got to kind of get the right guitar that fits, the right instrument that plays decent. You have to make it, as less frustrating as possible.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the things that I realized when I wanted to start was that I'm not a quitter, so I don't know how to quit. So one of the things for me is, yes, I'm not going to put it in the case. I got a case in case I want to take it places, but it's out, it's hanging on my wall. And so I said, when I'm in my other office, I don't have a guitar there, and I don't want to start taking this one out. So I got another one. And so that way, when I'm in my other office, I can have one there. And it's also, I hung it on the wall So by seeing it is, I think, one of the most important things. And you talked about that. You don't want to hide it under your bed. You don't want to put it in a closet. You
Right.
want to have it accessible. So even if you only have 2 minutes, just to pick it up. And that's one of the things that I realized right away. It's anything that you want to get good at, you have to pick up, right? This is what I tell my students who want to learn the sword. I said, well, if you want to learn the sword, you have to learn to sleep with it. They're like, sleep with my weapon? I'm like, yeah, basically. It means you have to pick it up all the time. You have to have it in your hands all the time. And that's how I feel about the guitar. Like sometimes, I put my Keurig to for the coffee. I'll just, while the coffee's coming out, I'll grab the guitar and I'll just start hitting
Yeah,
a couple of chords. Because
that's
even though I don't have time necessarily, but that 1 minute is gonna, so that way I'm staying fresh, right?
Yeah, and that's so awesome that you learned that or you figured that out. And I tell that to my students all the time. I've done videos on that. It's like,
Mm,
especially early on, that's the worst thing you could do is you get finished with practicing, you pack your guitar up nice, you put it in the case and you put it under the bed. That's the worst thing you could do. I always tell students, buy a cheap guitar stand
right.
or a wall hanger. Leave your guitar in the room that like you do that you're in the most. And once you see it, especially if you're committed, you're like, I got to pick that up. Making that connection is huge. Even if you only have 5 minutes, like you said, before your coffee's ready, 5 minutes before dinner, 5 minutes before while the laundry's in the dryer. Pick up your guitar, go through the exercises,
Mhm.
practice your chord changes. It makes such a huge difference. I kind of like early on in my playing, I listened to something that I think it was Branford Marsalis, or was it Wynton Marsalis? Two brothers. They're really incredible jazz musicians. I like jazz too. I like a lot of
Mm,
music. He said something to me along, not to me. He said I heard an interview with him many years ago, and he said something like along the lines of like, you know, they asked him, "How did you get so good?" And he's like, I didn't sit there and practice hours and hours and hours. He goes, "What I did do was when I had a spare 15 minutes, whenever it was, I hit the instrument, and I was able to put in." 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes when I got home from school, 15 minutes after, after dinner, 15 minutes before I went to bed, 15 minutes here, 15 minutes, 10 minutes here and there. You don't necessarily have to, like a lot of people think, well, I can't play an instrument. I don't have an hour a day.
mhm,
You don't need that. You could do, if you have these little pockets of time, and a lot of times, we all do this, like we have these little pockets of time that we waste, that we don't do anything, and we're decompressing or we're, surfing on the web or whatever we're doing, flicking through the channels. That's a little pocket of time where you could just grab the guitar, do five, like you do 5, 10 minutes
mhm,
before your coffee's ready. And those little pockets of time add up, you
right.
know, and they make a big difference. And leaving your guitar out is a big part of it. So yeah, have a guitar in multiple rooms or get a wall hanger. So that's a big deal when,
Mm,
especially early on. The more you can put that guitar in your hands, even if it's for a short time, the better.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So right across the screen, we have your YouTube channel, which is Epic Instruction, right?
Epic, that's one of my. I have multiple YouTube channels, but that's the one that's getting the most play right now. Epic Guitar Instruction, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then what is your TikTok handle?
Yeah, my TikTok handle is at David Taub one. That's David, David, and then my last name Taub, and then the number one. So
Yeah.
that's my
There you go.
TikTok. Um, my one YouTube channel is Epic Guitar Instruction, and that's more song based. So
Mm,
I have other lessons on there too. But if you want to learn lots of songs, all level, a lot of easy songs, a lot of beginner songs, a lot of songs you won't need bar chords for. In fact, I have playlists for songs with no bar
nice.
chord, songs with one bar chord. Um, so if you want to learn songs, I break it down, make it easy. I teach you the strum patterns, the chords. I write the patterns out. My lessons are pretty unique. I put a lot of time into making it easy for the students. And then I have another YouTube channel, which I started a very long time ago, which is Rock On Good People. That's more straight lessons, no songs, but
Mm,
lessons, beginner, intermediate, advanced, all genres. And then I have a full membership website, video instructional site that you could join for a month or 3 months or a year. That's nextlevelguitar.com. My company's
love
Next
it.
Level Guitar Inc. So nextlevelguitar.com. You can go on there. And in fact, there's a 3-day free pass. So you can peruse around the site for a couple days, take some lessons, see if it's for you. But the beginner curriculum, especially, people love because it's very structured. Lesson one, lesson two, do this, and takes you through. 200 beginner lessons. So yeah, so the TikTok, the YouTube, and the website. And then I have a lot of courses if you just want to get like a certain course on an intense study topic. Like let's say you're trying to learn bar chords. I have a course on bar chords. Let's say you want to learn how to solo. I have courses on soloing. And you can go to my all my courses are listed at nextlevelguitar.com/shop, SHOP. And you can
Mm.
buy them digitally and have them instantly. So Next Level Guitar Shop, you can look through them. Again, there's all levels. I even have bass guitar. If you want to learn bass guitar, I have courses on studying the styles of certain players. I have courses on blues, rock,
I
shred.
just I just pulled out your Next Level Guitar Premium beginner lessons 1 through 99.
Oh, right, right, yeah,
Incredible. One of the things that I gotta give you um, credit, because you're so easy going. You're such an amazing instructor that you make it easy for anybody who has just even picked up the guitar for the first day, and they can go right from day one and move along with you. And I'm encouraging everybody to follow you. You make it so darn easy to
thank
say,
you.
hey, you know what? I can do this. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of instructors complicate life. They complicate things, and you don't. You say, hey, if I can do it, you can do it, and let me show you how you can do it. And I think that's an incredible feat to have. And I think, one of the things that you said is not everybody, and you said this earlier, who may be a good practitioner is a good instructor. And I think one of the most important aspects of being a great instructor is patience, right? Because
Yeah.
how do you feel about somebody that you say, I want to learn guitar, and then you go, do this, and do that, and then they come back, I stink at it. I haven't done it. And you go, did you do one? Did you do two? No, I haven't done that. I just want to get to step 4. And then, so how do you not lose your patience when they don't even want to go through the first few steps? They just want to go, all the way to the top without having to doing the work.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, obviously there's some, as a teacher. And by the way, thank you for all those kind words. I really appreciate that.
It's how I feel, man. You
Thank
know,
you. Thank you. That's
yeah.
what keeps me going, you know. Um, and I and early on in my teaching, I kind of learned that, in my opinion, one of the best things I do is I try to put myself in the shoes of the student. I try to take my lessons from the perspective of, okay, this what's the student like that's watching me do this, and like what questions would they have, or what do they see in their eyes. So that's why I was able to, I think, develop my teaching style, and people were able to connect with it because I kind of put myself in the student's shoes. um,
Mm,
and there's students that grab the instrument very quickly and can assimilate the lessons fast. And then there's like you said, the students not so much. Most of the time, though, I have found if a student is really wanting to learn to play the instrument, they're willing to go through the steps necessary and to get there. I do have occasionally I'll run into a student, and like you say, they just want to go right into like playing songs, or something like that. And you know, I try to break it down and get to songs quickly to keep them motivated. Every student's different. So I try to come up with an individualized curriculum when I'm teaching privately, one-on-one or through Skype, and try to get into, what are their goals and what motivates them about guitar, and try to take it from that standpoint. You know, I have students like, and it probably happens more with younger students like that are maybe, 9, 10, 11, 12, where, I have the conversation with the parents first, that, does a student have time? Are they going to be able to practice? And like I've had students where, each lesson they were supposed to try to learn A, B, C, and D, and the next lesson they didn't learn that at all. So it's hard. I can't really go on to the next step and dump more work on them when they haven't learned this. And if that happens over and over again, and I can't seem to get them to
mm,
understand, then I have a conversation with the parent. And then I'm like, because I feel bad, because it's like, I don't want to
mhm.
waste your money. I don't want you to
Right.
keep giving me money and I'm teaching them the same thing over and over again and they're not practicing. you know. But that's not, I don't run into that a lot, believe it or not. Like I said, most of the time when people come to me and they're gonna, if they want private lessons and they're gonna spend their hard-earned cash, they're willing to put in the work and the
Yeah.
time. And sometimes it's more work for some students. Some students get it quicker than others. But but yeah, I have had the tough students, and I just got to put my head down. And I've been doing it so long. Excuse me. I've been doing it so long that I kind of, I have a tremendous amount of patience, so I could kind of deal with most situations on the teaching end. But it is easy to get frustrated, especially if you keep going over the same things and whatnot. And it's not a matter of them just not understanding. Oftentimes, a matter of them just not practicing it and
Hmm.
coming to the next lesson. And it's like, well, guitar is kind of early on, especially, is like a staircase. You got to master, got to get good at this before we can get onto this or this. You can learn multiple things at once for sure, but
Yeah.
the beginning fundamentals are really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised. Most of the time, I have to say that when someone comes in, wants to learn, and they're passionate, they'll do the steps. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's true, likewise in any endeavor somebody takes, if it's up to them, then they'll do it. But if it's their parent pushing them, that's when they you know they're fighting the whole way through.
Right.
So and one of the things I'll tell my students is say, hey, you know what? I love to teach. And if I have to teach you that same lesson 300 times, so be it. But guess what? You probably want the next lesson, don't you? So it's like, yeah. I said, well, put the work in. And a lot I'll say, did you practice? They're like, yeah. I'm like, show me. And then they can't do. I'm like, did you really practice?
Yeah.
And so that's where I let them know that, hey, look, I'm here to help you, right? And your demeanor is so amazing. This is why I was drawn to you, because you're very much a teacher, like I'm a teacher. I'm patient, and I want to encourage people to learn. And I think that learning is fun, and it's mental, right? It's fundamental. So for me, it's always about connecting with my members, connecting with my students. And you have that. You can, even though before today I never met you in person, but you portray that in your lessons, that the ones that I've seen you do. You're just amazing, my friend. And thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for being here with me today. And this is coaching call, where I talk to amazing coaches from all over the world. And I was just telling you, I'm going to be out not too far from you in January. And if you're playing, I would love to find out where you're playing, because how often do you play, anyways?
I love playing out,
Hmm.
so I try to play out as much as I can, so I'm in a bunch of different, like most musicians, I'm in a bunch of different projects. I have my original band, but we only play out, when you're playing originals, you can't play out too much. We do like
Right.
once a month, but then I'm in a couple other bands. I'm in this acoustic project. We try to play out a couple times a month. And then I'm in some cover bands. And then I do what's called in the industry, I do a lot of hired gun gigs. Like I'll get a call from a trio or a duo, and they'll say, hey David, I have a show at this casino, are you available on this date? And so I try to fill my calendar up, and a lot of times, sometimes I'll get calls to do casino gigs or corporate events or like a party or like a special event, or play in a bar or club or something. So yeah, so I'll try to fill up my calendar with these hired gun gigs and whatnot. So I try to keep busy and play out. You know, it's nice if I could fill my calendar up to play out once a week. You know,
Mm,
so sometimes, and then sometimes I'll get both. I'll be playing both days, Friday and Saturday. Like last week I had a Friday. The week before was a Friday, Saturday. Sometimes it's like this week I'm playing Thursday night with my original band. So it depends, all different nights of the week. And, playing out live is good. It keeps my chops up. And I
yeah.
like playing out live, and play with different musicians and whatnot. So yeah, so I'm lucky. I'm lucky that, I get the call. and my phone rings, I'm pretty wired. That's the thing when you're a musician too. Like I'm pretty wired into the musical scene in my town, and
Mm,
people kind of know like if if they call me, like I show up on time and I know the parts and I'm reliable. So that's what happens in the industry. Like a lot of people, if they're looking for like a hired gun, they have a list of names and they start going through the names. And your
right.
goal, try to get on this list and try to get high on the list. And you do that by
Mm,
proving that you're reliable, you show up, you know your stuff. And a lot of the business is referrals. I get a lot. Hey, Joe called me and said, maybe you'd be interested in this or this or this. So, but it's a challenge too. You might have the same challenge because you want to say yes to everything and not say no. But at the same
mm,
time, you have to be careful what you say yes to, because as far as if it's a longer term project, what you can commit to, because that takes you away from doing other things. And you have
mhm.
other goals as a musician, as an instructor. So you have to but you have to pay the bills.
Yeah, you do.
you
You
know,
do.
so you got to kind of straddle that line and whatnot. So yeah, but I try to play out as much as I can. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
One of the things you said that you're lucky, and I don't think you are lucky.
No?
I think you're gifted. I
Oh,
think you're,
I appreciate it.
people are not gonna say, "Hey, this guy's lucky, we should hire him." No, they're gonna say, "This guy's great, we should hire him," right? So that's the difference. And I appreciate your modesty, and I think that's why you're such a great instructor, because knowing that you even said you have to keep your chops up means that you're constantly evolving, because you're probably way better than you were a year ago,
That's
right?
true.
Because you keep challenging yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And you're teaching, and when you're teaching a lot too, and you're teaching
Oof.
different levels, like teaching martial arts, you're going to a lot of the stuff, even if it's the same thing, you're going to get better and better and better at it. So as a
Mm,
teacher, it really pushes you too, especially if you're teaching more advanced stuff,
mm.
and whatnot. So again, teaching keeps your chops up,
Oh yeah.
especially, I take what I do very seriously. So, and teaching, and because, I feel, if someone's going to give me their money, their hard-earned money, I have to be able to, step up and provide value for them and whatnot. And, a lot of the teaching is lesson planning, and it's not just the hour that
Mm,
I'm actually teaching a student. I'm putting time in before that and after that, working on a practice routine for them and staying in touch. And so it's a rigorous amount of work, but it's something that helps me in my craft as well, so
mm.
yeah, so I see a lot of the same things that you probably as a
Oh yeah.
teacher are going through. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very interesting, because sometimes when somebody goes, and I've been asked this a lot of times, do you don't you get tired of teaching? And I'm like, no, not at all. And they're like, how about teaching the beginners? I'm like, no. I said, because guess what? They're teaching me. They're teaching me how to teach, especially somebody who has a hard time learning. They make you a better teacher, right? Because you have to find different ways to help them. And by them being a difficult student, it just makes you that much better. If you can get them to do what you need done, it just makes you that much better, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, you
Mhm.
know your stuff, man.
That's it. You
Yeah,
have to know your stuff. Otherwise, how can you teach it, right?
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So cool, man. Well, I appreciate you, all your kind words, and I appreciate you checking out my lessons. And certainly, you could share with your audience too. If anybody has any questions about, my lessons, or about guitar, bass, or instruments, or learning, they can always email me too. Like I always make myself available.
Hmm.
So you could email me. My email address is just put a the before Next Level Guitar. It's very easy. The Next Level Guitar at yahoo.com. So,
Nice.
like you emailed me and asked, for that practice sheet, I get emails every day from students. So feel free, if you have questions, or you're wondering about it, or you need help, drop me a line, and I get back to students very quickly. I try to,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, but I let people know, I'm very accessible.
yeah.
So
You
yeah,
definitely are. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
let me know when you're out here in January. Maybe we can get together.
Yeah, I think that that'll be a fun. Even if you're
Where,
not playing, I'd like to take you out to dinner anyway. So
all right, yeah,
it'll be
where
fun.
you're in New York, right?
Yes, I'm in
Where are
Long
you?
Island, New York,
Oh, Long
Farmerville.
Island.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, man. So I appreciate you, and keep rocking for sure. And anybody who is either listened to this or has listened to it, and I know, listen, I am not a spring chicken. I look pretty good for 99, and it doesn't matter the age, right, David? It doesn't
Yes.
matter the age. You can pick up a guitar
I have
any time.
anytime. I mean, I have students as young as 8 years old. I mean, on the early end, you have to at least be able to finger a chord. Like student
Right.
that's 4 or 5, that might be a little too young. But if as long as they can get their fingers going. But I have, believe it or not, I have like a guy emailed 80 years old. He picked up a guitar for the first time. You could pick it
Nice.
up at any point in your life. And the great thing is about it is like it'll bring you joy for the rest of your life. And anybody can play.
Mm,
Anybody can play the instrument as long as you have that structured plan, or it doesn't have to be me personally. I mean, you could have a teacher in your area, or a curriculum you find online, someone that you identify with, or that has a proven plan. As long as you have that structure and you're practicing the right things, I mean, anybody can learn to play and enjoy the guitar or any instrument. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And one of the things is that you make it accessible. So if somebody, maybe there's no guitar, but maybe you live in the boonies somewhere. Hey, do
Right.
you have the internet? Check
Yeah.
out my good friend David.
Right.
He is an amazing instructor. I'm not just saying it, guys. Trust me, he is amazing. You need
Yeah.
to check him out. Go to nextlevelguitar.com, sign up for it. It is worth it. It's listen, if you have a cup of coffee, his lessons are cheaper than a cup of coffee. If you think about it, right? You do the year plan, it's way cheaper,
True.
and way
Especially
cheaper than Starbucks and
especially
healthier.
coffee these days, right? Everything's so
Yeah,
expensive. Yeah.
exactly. All
Awesome.
right. Thank you, my friend. Have yourself an exceptional rest of your day.
You too, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you,
All right,
buddy.
rock on.
All right, bye-bye.